Launchpad is Teesside University's business startup incubator. We provide support and advice for students, staff and graduates looking to start a new business venture. So, without further ado, ladies, gentlemen, students, teachers and future leaders, welcome to the Launchpad Sessions podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Launchpad Sessions with your host this time, Adam, the Enterprise Manager from Teesside University. Today we are joined by two special guests that I'm going to get into in a little bit of time. But today's subject is all about freelancing and setting up your own business. So today we're joined by Francis and Nick Moffat. Hi guys, how are you doing?
Hi, good, thank you.
Hi Adam, we're good.
Good. Thanks for joining us. It's really good to have you, and be good to have a really good conversation exploring the world of freelancing and starting up a business, which I know we've talked a lot about before. So what would be great for the listeners is just to find out a little bit about you individually and kind of your journey so far in line with freelancing, outside of freelancing, setting up a business, just who Francis and Nick are and where you come from. So Francis, do you want us to start with you? Could you just tell us a little bit about you and your background?
Yes, so I studied fashion at university and I started out as a fashion designer, and then I moved into illustration and education, and for many years I combined working as a freelance illustrator with lecturing, so that was in design, illustration and education as well. And then recently, around 2 years ago, I went full-time freelance again, and I've been doing that since. And about a year ago, myself and Nick set up the School of Illustration, which is a virtual school for illustrators, providing online courses.
Awesome, great introduction. So, and I guess we'll get into the School of Illustration in a little bit, but before we move on to Nick, just a quick question from me is, obviously like you said, your kind of degree was in fashion. How did you navigate your way into illustration? What did that journey look like?
Well, it was partly kind of necessity, because I'm from the northeast and I studied in the northeast, and then I moved to London to work, and then I wanted to move back to the northeast, and it wasn't. So it was partly, there aren't any design studios, really, fashion design studios in the northeast, and I'd always been interested in illustration, and I knew that was something I could do freelance, and I could kind of work from anywhere. So I came back and actually I did a part-time master's degree at Teesside University, and just so I could kind of put a portfolio together, because my portfolio was a fashion design portfolio full of technical drawings, so obviously that wasn't appropriate at all for getting illustration work. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it.
Awesome. And
so retrained essentially.
And I guess the big question from when you were studying is, what support were you given to make that decision? Because jumping into, like you say, studying part-time masters, obviously at Teesside, but then thinking about what direction you're going into in a self-employment route. Can you remember any guidance that you specifically given, or?
Not really. So the MA I did was actually a multidisciplinary design MA, but I did have a lecturer, two actually, who had been freelance illustrators, so I got advice from them. But actually I kind of went into the MA with a very strong idea of what I wanted to do, and I was quite clear, and so I actually it was really kind of outside of university. I went and found that information for myself. For example, joining the Association of Illustrators, which is like the UK illustration trade body, and they've got loads and loads of really good practical advice. So I think I got some advice, but a lot of it I think I kind of did it outside on my own. It was kind of quite self-generated.
Awesome. And I think I guess that's an important thing for any person to do, to be able to do your research. If you're going on holiday, or if you're buying a car, or even the smallest things of, I'm going to get these trainers, or have they got a wide enough foot, but to do your own research as well. So that's great.
Yeah, definitely.
Great, thanks Francis. And Nick, coming over to you, so again, just a little bit about your journey and where you started off with freelancing to kind of get where you are now.
Hey Adam, spookily enough, I also studied fashion. I did. It's the Launchpad for illustrators everywhere. So I studied fashion, not with Francis, at Manchester, and that was kind of as a result of illustration wasn't really presented as a possible pathway to me. So it was kind of, I went to art college, did a foundation course where you kind of do a little bit of everything. Illustration wasn't one of those things, and fashion was an area where I was kind of excelling and where I was doing really good work because of my illustration skills, combined with design skills. So I also, went and studied fashion, and then, similar to Francis, came out of that and wanted to go. I realised a lot sooner I wanted to go into illustration. So using my fashion degree, I got a job in a design studio that created children's clothes. It made children's clothes, and I was part of the team who would create the illustrations for these children's clothes. So Postman Pat, Star Wars, Mr. Men, all those kind of kid-friendly licenses allowed me to kind of get an idea of what software to use, things like Photoshop. I learned everything kind of on the job until I was at the point where I thought, right, I can really sidestep into illustration. But at that point, I then went and worked in a greetings card studio, so still within that studio environment, still so I could soak up as much as I possibly could on the job, with an eye to kind of going freelance eventually. But at that point, I really didn't know anything. So going into the greeting cards market and working for UK Greetings, that really helped me, because I was then art directing freelancers, so I could kind of pick their brains and just see how it operated from the other side of the fence, and kind of get of as much as an idea as I could of what the freelance life involved and what I was requiring these artists to do, and thinking, right, well, that's something I'm going to need to be doing. I'm going to need to be able to communicate, hit a brief, get things in on time, hit deadlines. It was all of these kind of soft skills that you don't really think about when you're thinking of being an illustrator or just being a freelancer. You tend to focus on what you do as a freelancer and what the job involves, but not the running of the business, which in the case of a freelancer as a sole trader, you've still got to do. You still got to do those your books and things like that, which are things I picked up later. But at that point, it was all about, okay, well, what do I require this freelancer to be able to do? And I think the biggest thing was communication. I think communication, I soon realised, as a person commissioning the artwork and chasing the artwork, was a key skill to have. So I was in that studio for about 2 or 3 years, and then eventually I just made the leap. I just decided the time is right, I'm gonna go for it. So I just kind of stepped out the safety net of a studio environment and just went for it. Kind of didn't look back for about, I think I did it for about 12 years, 13 years. And then I just got to the point where I thought, okay, I've got all these skills, I've had this success as a freelancer, but it was a bit lonely. I worked on a huge project where I got to work in a studio, and again I got to work with a team of other freelancers, and it made me realise actually I kind of miss this camaraderie and this ability to bounce ideas off people, and that's what then took me into lecturing. So I was lecturing for a few years, which did kind of come from a wanting to work alongside other people, but also just came from me thinking I'd like to give something back. I didn't study illustration, as I said, I studied fashion. I didn't have those kind of skills presented to me as something you need beyond just being able to illustrate. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to go back and do the same thing for people who were studying illustration. And then 2 years ago, I just decided, was it a year ago? Yeah, it's a year. Wow, it flies. It was a year ago, yeah. I decided, you know what, I want to go back into freelance. I want to go back into illustration. It was when I was at my happiest. It was something which I really, really enjoy for many reasons. So in the past year, I've just made that leap back into full-time freelance.
Awesome. And that's quite a journey over a period of time. We're taking you with a question right back to the very start. Did you always know that you wanted to be a freelancer when you were studying, or is it the fact that actually you just wanted to work in a studio and be employed?
Yeah, when I was studying, I didn't quite have a grasp on what being an illustrator involved, or what being a freelancer involved. Working or studying in fashion, it was all very studio based. It was all very, you will go and work in a studio, you will be working for someone else, you will be within that environment, and that's where you'll kind of stay unless you get to the point where you can maybe open your own studio or your own label. But even then, the focus was on that's still a studio environment. It's not, there's no kind of Lone Ranger aspect to being a fashion designer, really, or there wasn't back then. And so it wasn't really anything that I considered. I'd say the closest in my mind was being a comic artist, because that was something I'd wanted to do when I was at school and when I was a kid. I'd always wanted to be a comics artist, but even then there wasn't enough information that made me realise that was what a freelance illustrator does. I was still of the mind, all these comics I'm reading, these Spider-Man comics, that must be created by a team who sit within a studio and all work together. I still had that mindset. So freelancing was never really something until my third year at university, when I started to think, okay, I don't want to be a fashion designer, I want to be an illustrator, whatever that means. I then started to read up on it and do research while I was at university, and started to get really kind of excited about the idea of being a freelancer, the idea of, creating business cards, creating logos, creating all these kind of things that other people might feel are quite nerdy and not part of it, but the idea of having this kind of ownership over myself as a creative, as a brand, was very exciting. But I also knew I'm not quite there, I'm not ready, which is why I went into the kind of the studio role, because I just knew within myself I'm not ready enough. Everything I'm getting, because there wasn't too much on the internet back then as well, because it was so long ago. Yeah. I was getting it from books, and I just didn't feel that confidence in, okay, as a creative freelancer, I know everything I need to be doing.
Great. And I think, what you've both, Francis and Nick, what you both said about freelancing is, the fact that actually gives you that, that creativity, but also the chance, which is scary at times, but the chance to go out on your own and really try something that you might be really passionate about. And actually, Nick, what you just said there about the industry, there's a lot of freelancing opportunities which, on the surface look like employed roles, but actually when you break them down, they are freelance. Which for me I would explore, encourage anybody to explore and look at that option. So I guess just a question to you both, and Francis, we'll start with you, coming back with your answer, is if you, in a bit, kind of taken, before we get into your next steps and what you're doing now with the School of Illustration, is, going back all that time, you both had a lot of experience in freelancing and working for other companies, but also studying up to, you've both mentioned your master's level kind of study. If there was one bit of advice you could give to yourself back on that fashion course, knowing all the experience and all the information that you've gained, what would that bit of information be?
I think for me it would have just been to have more confidence in my vision and the things I wanted to achieve. Because I think when I was younger, you almost feel like someone's got to come along and give you permission, or say, oh, you can do that, and actually, you can go out there and create what you want. It's not saying it's easy, but I think sometimes it's waiting for that validation from the outside, from someone else, that maybe prevented me from getting started. Because actually, what you've got to do is go out there and do it, and then once something is out in the world and you've put the hard work in, then you might get the validation, but it's kind of a bit of a chicken and egg situation, because if you've kind of got to get out there and do it first before maybe you start getting any outside acknowledgement from anybody else, either that's in terms of praise, whether that's in terms of commissions, anything like that.
Great, and some really good advice. I think you're 100% right. I think there's a safety net, isn't there, when you put something new out there where you think, oh, they're just all going to come, I'm going to put this great thing out there, but actually it takes a little bit of time. And Nick, same question to you. What? Yeah,
I mean, I completely agree with that. It is about having that belief in yourself, but since Francis has covered that so well there, I'd say clear vision. That's what I'd say to myself, is have that clear vision. Even when I ended up going freelance, I think I was kind of scrambling just to find my voice and my direction, because I was so frightened of if I was too clear on it, and if I was too driven to go in a certain direction, I might be missing other opportunities. And I'd say what happened was kind of the opposite, where eventually got to the point, and this is kind of more relevant to illustrators and creatives, where I was getting work and I was successful, but the majority of people at the beginning weren't coming for me. They were coming for a generic illustrator or a generic graphic designer, which is some of the work I was doing at the time. And that was a result of not having that clear voice of, this is who I am, this is the kind of work I want, this is the kind of work I'm presenting to the world, and this is how I draw, essentially. That was missing. So I'd say having that belief comes into it, like Francis said, and the belief should be in your vision. So do your research. I still, right now, since I left teaching and I've gone back into freelancing, I've had a much clearer idea of where I'm going, and I'd say I've had much more success now than I did when I started at the first time, and a lot of that is down to knowing exactly the kind of work I want to do and the kind of illustrator I want to be. So whatever you're doing, just don't panic that you're boxing yourself into a corner. Have that kind of real belief in your vision and know where you want to go. I think you still need to be open to change. You still need to be open to things maybe not going exactly how you want them to go. But if you've got that direction, at least you're constantly moving along a path and pivoting rather than just stopping and starting continuously as things fail and you decide to pick it up and just start again with something else because that obviously hasn't worked. So I'd say having that kind of clarity of vision of where you want to be and what it is you want to be doing.
Great, and really good tips from both. I mean, from the from the kind of Freelance Fridays model, which is now live, and kind of the events for students to attend and find out about all these kind of things that we've got at the university with freelancing. But the modules have just been released, and there's a part with one of the modules which encourages the students to figure out what their superpower is, what is their freelance superpower. So the fact that you were talking there about, you know, you went in as a general graphic designer, and then over time you know exactly who your market is, who you're meant to reach out. You know, that research is really important. So you know, thanks for sharing those. That's really interesting. And I guess from that, looking from another question as a perspective is, you know, you've about that advice, but thinking about the things that maybe haven't went right at a point in your freelancing, illustrating in this case, careers. What's the one moment where you thought, oh, I wish I would have done that differently, or I wish I would have known this when I was exploring going into freelancing? Is there anything that you think there's a moment in, like, you captured in your head where you think, oh, you know, if I would have known about this before, it would have been a lot easier? And again, Francis, coming to you first.
I think for me it was I got an agent. I was approached by an agent because they'd seen my work in a trade magazine, and that was really exciting. I was like, great. And it wasn't really a mistake because I'm glad I did it, but I signed with this agent, and all different, you know, there's pros and cons to having an agent as an illustrator. And this agent, like some agents, expect you to run all of your work through them. So even if you've got previous clients, all your clients have now got to go through them, and they take a cut, even though, you know, actually you've individually gone and have had those, you know, you've found those clients yourself essentially. So I was like, oh, you know, starting off, so I was like, I'll give it a go, and it was, you know, good agency, but it was pretty big, and I found that I was getting work that I didn't want to do. So my work is very kind of fashion, lifestyle, definitely aimed, quite figurative, I would say, aimed at an adult audience, and that agency got quite a lot of children's book work, and I found I was getting work, but it was lots of smaller, kind of lower paid projects, and it was working in a style that kind of wasn't really mine for a children's audience. And so after about a year, I got to the point where I was like, you know, I don't really think this is for me, and I left. And I think it's probably the same as my original point. I wish I'd just trusted my own judgment a little bit more, because quite a lot of people around me were saying, well, what are you doing? You're kind of walking away from this agency and who are getting you work, and is that a really good idea? And you can't always be doing exactly what you want, and which is true. You've got to keep an open mind, but then you've also got to realise when you kind of going a little bit down a dead end of something that isn't really you. And I think I made that decision, and then quite shortly afterwards I got an offer to do a book to illustrate a whole book, which was a really good opportunity, and it was the biggest kind of job of my career so far. And it was as a result of my own personal efforts as an individual, probably about 18 months before sending my work out to clients. And I remember being like, I felt really vindicated, because I was just like, right, if I'd have stayed with the agent, I'd have had to, like, that would have been like 35% signed over to them when they had nothing to do with it. And publishing isn't very well paid, really. You know, you don't get a lot of money for doing books when you think of the amount of time you put into them. So yeah, just wish I'd just had just wish I'd kind of trusted myself a bit more and maybe not got stressed out about other people's opinions, because it did turn out for the best in the end, and it was the right decision for me at that time.
Oh, great, and a great learner. Thanks for sharing that, because those things are, when you reflect on them, you think, oh, but definitely the right one with the book by the sounds of things. And
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's knowing, sometimes it is the best thing to walk away from things that actually might, from the outside or possibly to other people, look like a good opportunity, but aren't the right thing anymore.
Definitely. And same question to you, Nick. Any kind of?
Yeah, I'd say knowing your worth. When I first started, you're fumbling in the dark as far as pricing goes. You don't really know if you haven't done any research. Francis mentioned the Association of Illustrators there, who are great for giving advice on things like this. But yeah, when you're starting, just knowing how much to charge, because sometimes it's that eagerness as well to just be working. So you'll take less money than you really should be. And I'd say once I'd been in the industry a bit longer, and then I also got an agent, and that really opened my eyes to just how much budget clients really do have to play with. Whereas at the beginning, it'd be a case of me either just kind of guessing what I think it's worth and what I think a particular job is worth, or just kind of taking what they're offering and not questioning it. And then as time progressed, I realised, well, actually, I can ask for more. And just learning that by going back and actually saying, okay, well, this is how much I'd like, or that's not enough. You've got two clients, essentially, where one would say, okay, well, we'll give you this much, we can stretch the budget to this, or the person will just go, oh no, we haven't got any more, we're not going to do it. And I find, looking back on those early clients, the ones who claim they've got no more money and that's all they've got, tend to be the most painful clients, because they're the most demanding, because they're not operating on the real world. In the real world, I'd say, as far as them offering low wages or a low fee is a reflection of how little they understand about what they're asking for. So they always turned out to be the jobs that took longer, because they would assume they've paid you to do a job, and therefore until the job's done to their satisfaction, they can just keep coming back with amends and changes and revisions, or just completely scrap something halfway through and go, we want to start again. And it's not the way it works when you work in freelance. As an illustrator, at least, or as a creative, you have that written into a contract at the beginning, saying you will have so many revisions, you will allow one round of revisions perhaps, you will get so many amends, and you'll have those kind of things set out in the contract, and then that makes them really think about what it is they want. So if they know going in, okay, I'm only going to get 2 rounds of revisions here, then they're going to go in thinking, I better make sure what I'm asking for is exactly what I want. Whereas if they've got carte blanche, you tend to get clients who just give you that classic one. I'm sure you've had it as well, Francis. I don't know what it is I'm after, but just do me some drawings and I'll let you know when you've got it right. And you can be just splashing around for ages doing that. So it's about knowing your worth and knowing you can say no to those low paying jobs, or you can go back and say, actually, I want more money for this, which is something now I'm really comfortable doing. I'm really comfortable just saying, well, no, because it's never going to be a loss. I think one eye opener for me was when I'd obviously quoted too low for a job. It was for a leading supermarket chain, and they wanted 3 illustrations, and I gave them a figure for all 3 illustrations, but I didn't state this is for all 3. They assumed it was for 1, so they came back with a counter offer, which was slightly below what I'd asked for, but bearing in mind what I'd asked for was for 3, and they were out saying this is for each of the illustrations. I was like, right, so obviously there's a lot bigger budgets people playing with here, and that really made me realise, oh, actually I should be asking for more money here, I should be upping my prices. So that was completely accidental. If that hadn't happened, that wouldn't have been that first step. And then, like I said, when I had an agent, agents are fantastic because they know exactly what to ask for, and they know how to haggle on your behalf, so you can sit back and just wait for the money men to sort everything out, and then they just come in with a figure and go, this is what we've arranged, and you know that's going to be the best fee you can possibly get for it.
Great. And actually it's quite good that you both mentioned agents there, but totally different scenarios that actually sometimes they can work, sometimes they can't. I guess that's across all industries as well, that you put the support in place that you need depending on your experience or your skill set. But freelancing is one of those things where even in the industry they don't understand that it's somebody who's putting their full-time efforts into it. Freelancing for me still got that stigma around that we can pay them less money and they're just going to do it on the side. It's not their real income, but actually freelancing makes up a lot of the jobs in the UK market across a lot of the support mechanisms, which actually businesses wouldn't be able to operate without. So definitely I think as a society we need to change the way we think of freelancing, and the fact that actually it's just like another job role. Instead of being a doctor or a firefighter, you're a freelancer in whatever discipline you are. So awesome, thank you very much. So so obviously we've explored some really good kind of experiences from you both about your freelancing journeys, but I'm intrigued to get into the School of Illustration and where that came from. Obviously supported from within the university through the field program that you both attended last year, but do you just want to tell us a little bit about the School of Illustration and how that came about and what's the plans for the future?
So after a couple of years of working of teaching illustration at degree level, I think it's that thing of obviously, quite correctly, when you're teaching in a university, it's an accredited course, whether that's a BA or an MA, and you've got courses need to be validated, any changes, you have all of your modules, and there's lots of rules and regulations which there does need to be if you're working within accredited study. And we just kind of got to the point where we felt we wanted to basically kind of do our own thing. And having worked as freelancers, we were just like, right, I'd like to be able to have, we enjoy teaching, but actually I'd like to be able to have that control and have my vision for what I want to teach. And we thought, we want to do something that's online, really a lot more vocationally focused actually. So it's really focused on, one of our, we say on our website, don't we? We don't teach you how to draw, we teach you how to be an illustrator. That's two different things. So we really just wanted to be able to kind of put our own curriculum together, put our own courses together, focusing on the things that we felt were important, and really have that ownership. And it was also because we wanted to both go back to the full-time creative life really, and we thought, right, if we kind of do the teaching online and have an online business, that's going to fit around our freelancing as another income stream, and it's going to give us more time to focus on our creative practice. So it was twofold really.
Awesome. And as well as the online courses, you also offer other types of support.
Yes, so we do offer one-to-one mentoring as well.
Great.
So that's really an hour. So I just do the mentoring at the moment. So people can book an hour, and it's where you can it's a really kind of deep dive into. We have an intake form, so ahead of time you say what you want to discuss, any questions you might have, or any areas of your practice you particularly want to focus on, and any links to websites, social media, and then I spend time before the session going through that and kind of getting some ideas on what the students could actually do and any other resources that might help them. So yeah, we've got the online courses which we're actually in the process of recording now and will be coming out very shortly, and then we've got we have actually the bespoke individualised advice and the off-the-shelf courses. We also are we've partnered with the Association of Illustrators and run one of their meetup groups in Newcastle as well. So that's a not-for-profit giving something back networking event really. So that's something we do, and we also we have done in-person workshops and trainings as well.
Awesome. And you've got a podcast out as well?
Yes, we have. So we recorded a couple of episodes, didn't we, Nick, last year?
Yeah.
And then things got quite busy and it went by the wayside a little bit. And then we're starting up with that again, and I've got quite a few interesting topics planned for that.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, so that's something we're going to be doing regularly moving forward as well.
Yeah, we feel the podcast, it's our opportunity to kind of communicate with people. So the meetups are great for that we do, those organised events, but The podcast just gives us the same as, obviously what you're doing here, the opportunity to very quickly share that information. Social media is great for, especially for us, for images and things, or to notify people of stuff, but we can't really on Instagram get stuck into, our thoughts on illustration, our thoughts on everything around what illustration is. That includes topics we talk about with things like just managing a business, but also just managing that work-life balance. We think as a freelancer especially, it's really important not to burn out. We feel there's a lot of thankfully it's not so much now, but that real kind of hustle culture of you've got to be working 24 hours a day, you got to be hammering it, and you're going to burn yourself out. You're not going to be able to work the best you can work. So it's things like that we use a podcast for, to talk about the struggles we have and the way we deal with these things. Myself and Francis, we've got two completely different energy levels. I'm someone who can be juggling 50 things at the same time. I can be, at the moment, I'm just completing my MA. We're also setting up the school, and I'm doing my freelance practice. And I'm kind of, I thrive on that, and I love that. Whereas with Francis, you're much more kind of, you can focus on one thing, and if you have to start spreading yourself too thinly, it can start to have kind of an effect on your mental health, can't it? And
I just get kind of too tired and stressed, so I need to be really careful about managing my time, really, and my energy. And I think that is, as a freelancer, I think that's a process that everybody needs to go on, because it's not one size fits all. You've got to really kind of figure out what works best for definitely. You, because it can be, you can look around at lots of other people, and what's right for them might not necessarily be right for you, and it doesn't mean you can't be a freelancer.
No, definitely
it just means you've just got to be kind of clever and thoughtful about how you kind of set up your life, really, and manage your time.
And I'm the same with Nick. I would probably go on your scale where, I do a little bit of freelance work, and actually I like having 3 or 4 things going on at the same time. It just makes me kind of all the jigsaws fit together.
Yeah.
But that's, it's a really good learning as well, that everyone, it's up to them, and then there's not a defined way to do it. And obviously you've got your social media channels as well, so under the School of Illustration, which everyone can find if interested.
Yeah, on Instagram.
Yeah. And so before we get, just I guess a couple of questions that are still left. The first one is, in very short, nice and snappy, is what's your top tip right now? Obviously, when we did the launch of Freelance Fridays, you were both there at the launch and give some really good tips. But if you could give one tip right now for anyone thinking about going into freelancing, so any student listening to this, or graduate, or anyone looking to pick up the modules, what's your tip? So Francis, I'll go to you first. My
top tip would be find community and start building those relationships with other people who are freelancers. And it's really helpful if it is somebody in your field, because they'll understand the specifics, and they can vary a lot from industry to industry, but just somebody who kind of gets it, really. And that might be in real life, going to networking events, that might be online, but I think it can feel a little bit lonely, and I've definitely been in that position where you don't know anybody else in your life who's freelancing and everyone else is employed. And so they don't really quite understand the challenges that you might be facing. So yeah, I think it's start building that community and that network, because that's really important to that'll carry you through when times are tough, when you have people to lean on. And also you don't have to go it alone. There are lots of other people, whatever industry you're in freelancing, there's loads of other people out there doing the same thing, and you kind of just need to find them and connect with them.
Awesome. And Nick, same question to you.
It's the same answer again. Francis keeps stealing the good answer. Yeah. It's about having that belief. It's about really believing what you're doing, and I think that falls into what Francis just said there in terms of community. Do your research. Don't go in there blindly, but at the same time have that belief in what you're going to do, because you could be, and we found this, surrounded by people who don't share that lifestyle, and therefore the people closest to you could be people who have chosen a completely different path in life and therefore don't really understand what it is you're doing. So if you can surround yourself with people in a similar situation, and I think Freelance Fridays is fantastic for this, because you've already got a ready-made community there that you can tap into. It's having those people around you who do know what your journey is, because they're going to give you the best support. There's a cliche we keep hearing from people who have their first piece of tremendous success normally is followed by them saying, and then I told my partner or my family, and they brought me right back down to earth by not caring. And we don't think that's healthy. We, like, maybe for you, being brought down to earth should be, as a successful freelancer, maybe your earth, your baseline should be successfully achieving these things you want to achieve. So if you're surrounded by people who are doing what you want to do, even if it's just as surface as being another freelancer, they're the people who can really validate you and maybe kind of give you that support you need in you know, your darkest hour, where you are questioning yourself and you are questioning, well, maybe I can just go and work for another company and work for a wage instead of doing it for myself. Having that support around you is going to give you, you know, that belief that you need to keep going, because sometimes it can be quite frightening, sometimes it can be quite intimidating. So the community around you are absolutely perfect for just giving you that kind of validation and that belief and that support that you need.
Awesome. And nice summed up in that as well, belief and community, so taking both parts and putting them in. So great. Well, thank you very much for obviously your insights and talking about your experiences. I really appreciate it, and hopefully the listeners will find it helpful in their journeys within freelancing. So as part of the podcast, well, my podcast episodes, you know, I'm going to ask you a question, which I would like you to pick a question 1 to 5, and then I'll give you the question that you have to then answer. The random questions, not necessarily just based around freelancing. So, Francis, we'll come to you first. Number 1 to 5.
I'll go for 3.
Okay. So, good question, actually. I did write them, so you know, I'm just going to say that.
You're biased.
So the question is, if you could star in a movie, what movie would it be?
I think it would be a costume drama based on classic literature.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I like all the, you know, when you get the like Jane Austen adaptations or the Brontes, or I like all of that.
That's cool. Yeah, things with costume where you can take you back to a certain, you know, decade or whatever.
Yeah,
so.
and I think coming from a fashion background as well, I love all the actual costumes and like the fashion and things in them. You know, when a film's really like nailed that kind of period of time with everything, I really like that.
Awesome. Good answer. And Nick, obviously you can pick 3, but you've had 3.
It is a good question.
But if you can pick another number.
Yeah, I'll go for 2. Number 2, please.
If you had a superpower, what would it be?
Oh man. I'll have to pretend I've never thought of this before. It's just been presented the first time. I'd love flight, would be great, but I'd just be absolutely terrified. So I guess I think I'd just go for flight, but get over myself and get used to it. have that belief I was talking about. If I can fly, I'm going to be all right. I'd go for flight because it can just get you places, and also it can get you away from people. So that so I think flight's the one I'd go for. Everything else, I'm just too clumsy. I'd be too if I was super strong or vulnerable, I'd just be falling over and breaking things and putting holes in walls. So I think flight's the one I'd go for.
Awesome. And well, to be honest, if I went for a flight, would be mine as well. I just think awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks very much for joining us, Francis and Nick, and for your time and hearing all about your journeys in the School of Illustration. For anyone who's listening who's thought, yeah, you know what, I'm really interested in freelancing, check out Teesside University's freelance program, Freelance Fridays, and if for any information or just to make an inquiry and have a first meeting, come and chat to us at Launchpad. So thanks for your time. And,
Thank you.
And
thanks, Adam.
See you again.
Thanks.